Let's talk about something that should have everyone paying attention, especially if you're someone who cares about justice, fairness, and what happens when power goes unchecked. We own the Supreme Court isn't exactly a neutral institution anymore, right? But right now, they're pushing things further than ever. They've been chipping away at immigrant rights for years, but the latest rulings, they're straight up dangerous. And they don't just affect immigrants, they affect all of us. You may not have heard of the name Abrego Garcia, but after you hear about this case, you wish you had. The Supreme Court just handed down a ruling that could change the way US treats immigrants forever. And it's bad news for justice. The Supreme Court recently made a decision that's set to echo across the future of immigration law. And make no mistake, this case is bigger than just one person's fate. The ruling has far-reaching consequences that could potentially strip protections away from countless immigrants, and with it, undermine basic principles of justice that we should all care about. The case centers around a man, Abrego Garcia, who has been in the United States for over 2 decades. He has family here, he's built a life here, and he has followed the law. Or at least he tried to. He was detained by ICE and placed in removal proceedings. But what happens next is key. The court ruled that someone in his situation, someone who has lived here, built ties to the community, who has strong family connections, could be stripped of their rights without a hearing to weigh his claims. In short, if you're an immigrant, the Supreme Court just said it's much easier to send you back, even if you have deep roots in the United States. Why should you care about this? Because the way the court ruled isn't just a technicality or some legalese we can ignore. It represents a major shift in how immigrants will be treated in this country moving forward. This is not just about one case. And what the court has just signaled is that they're comfortable with making it easier to deport people, even those who have lived here for years, and even those who pose no threat to society. This decision falls right in line with a broader trend we've seen from the Supreme Court, a willingness to tear down protections for marginalized communities and allowing the government to operate without checks or balances. In immigration, well, that's just ground zero for this kind of attack. Here's the thing. The court's ruling makes it clear that even if an immigrant is facing removal proceedings under the most unjust of circumstances, they're not entitled to the usual level of legal protections or fair chance to plead their case. This isn't just about one person getting screwed over. This is about making it so much easier for ICE to round up people and ship them out, no questions asked. You might be thinking, well, I'm not an immigrant. This doesn't affect me. But here's the reality check. The erosion of rights for one group always sets a dangerous precedent for others. This decision shows us exactly how far the court is willing to go in undermining basic civil protections. First it's immigrants, then who's next? Who knows? If a government agency can unilaterally strip a person of their legal status without due process, what's to stop that from happening to anyone? These rulings are a reminder that power isn't just about what's happening today, it's about what could happen tomorrow. And if we let this slip by, we're setting ourselves up for a future where nobody's rights are guaranteed, especially when they don't have the political or social power to fight back. What this ruling ultimately shows us is the court's increasing willingness to side with institutions like ICE over the rights of individuals. In other words, they're giving the green light for federal authorities to expand their control, power, and reach into people's lives with little oversight. No hearing, no due process, no real checks or balances. In the bigger picture here, we're witnessing consolidation of authoritarian power. When a state has unchecked authority over individuals, there's no room for freedom, no room for liberty, no room for justice. When the court fails to protect the rights of vulnerable populations, it doesn't just weaken the immigrant community, it weakens all of us. Immigrant communities are already living in fear. Families are being torn apart. Parents are being separated from children. People are being deported in the middle of the night, sometimes with no warning or real recourse to change their removal. This ruling just makes it that much harder for immigrants to protect themselves. Think about it. Someone like Abrego Garcia, someone who has lived in the United States for 20 years, has a family, a home, a job, is being treated like an outsider, someone who doesn't matter, someone whose life is expendable. What kind of system does that? People shouldn't have to live in fear of being deported to a country they may have left as children, or worse, a country they may have never even known. But that's where we're heading towards, a system that doesn't value humanity of its people, just their citizenship status. So what can we do? It's simple. We cannot stay silent. This isn't a time to look away and pretend this isn't our fight. This is a human rights issue, plain and simple. The Supreme Court is showing us its hand, and we cannot let this trend continue unchecked. We need to demand accountability from our lawmakers. We need to call for judicial reforms. We need to stand with immigrants, not just in solidarity, but in action. Because when the system stops protecting those who need it most, it's on all of us to make sure that justice doesn't become a commodity that only the privileged can afford. We need to make sure these dangerous decisions don't go unchallenged, because today it's immigrants, but tomorrow it could be anyone. anyone who's considered other, undesirable, or unworthy. The Supreme Court's latest ruling is more than just another legal case. It's a chilling reminder that the fight for rights and justice is far from over. So take a moment to think about this. What kind of country do we want to live in? One where justice is handed out based on privilege, or one where everyone gets a fair chance, regardless of their background? So what do you think? Is this case as terrifying as I'm making it out to be? Or do you think it won't impact you at all? Please subscribe, like, and leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. And always remember, progress isn't radical.